Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Mouthy Money podcast. I am joined, as ever, by my good colleague Chris Tuite, a co-host of the pod. Hello, Chris. Good
Hi Ed, how
evening.
you doing? You all right?
Yeah, good, thank you. It feels like very short days at the moment. It's the first time I think we've recorded, and it's dark outside, at least for me anyway, out here in the southwest.
Yeah,
Whether
no.
it's
Looking
like
out the
you.
window here at the River Thames, it's lots of lights, but surrounded by pools of black.
Very
So yeah, quite
nice
Christmassy
drawing
though.
in. Yeah. So I'm encouraging listeners to really get cozy this evening, put the kettle on and have a good listen, because we are talking again, because it's actually a really important topic. We're talking about pensions, and joining us today we have got Andrew Tully. Andrew is from a company called Nucleus. Andrew, welcome.
Thank you. Good to be here.
Andrew, just before we kind of get into what we're going to talk about today, because we've got a few things we're gonna dig through in pensions land. Tell us a bit about yourself, where you're from, and tell us a bit about Nucleus too. What Nucleus does.
Excellent. Yeah, so I am a technical director at Nucleus, so I run a team of kind of experts around pensions, tax, trusts. I've worked very sadly in the pensions industry for more than 30 years, so very in the industry. I live in Cheshire, but as the accent probably suggests, I'm originally from Edinburgh. Nucleus, for those who haven't heard, Nucleus are a financial platform, so we work with financial advisors to help clients manage all of the money in one place. So that's whether it's pensions, ISAs, savings, or you can have all of that under one roof and easily managed.
So, Andrew, we've got you here today with us in the first instance because Nucleus has got some recent research out, which has got some quite interesting stuff in it. I think we're going to talk through today about a few different areas relating to pensions, which I think as the podcast goes on, we'll dig into. Happily, though, we've hit upon a bit of a news angle today on the day of the recording, and this is something that we've coaxed you into talking to us about first. Because it is interesting. It's a slightly technical topic, but it's interesting. So what's happened? The FCA, that's the UK's financial regulator, has basically announced an update on its kind of direction of travel on a pretty big issue in pensions, and that's the advice gap. So what that is essentially the level at which, and Andrew, tell me if I'm getting this wrong at all, but it's the difference between the level at which advisors are prepared to give people advice, kind of the wealth level that people should be at, versus kind of what normal people can afford to do when it comes to advice. Is that kind of right? I maybe botched it slightly there, but
No, that's reasonable. So about 1 in 10 of the UK population get advice. And that's partly down to cost, and that's partly just down to accessibility. Maybe people just don't have, either don't want to take advice or just don't have sufficient money to take advice, because obviously cost to taking that financial advice. And the kind of opposite end of the spectrum is guidance. So people just give factual information to people to try and help them make decisions. And what the regulator's saying is that there's a gap in there. So we've kind of got two ends of the spectrum, and what ideally we need is something just sitting in the middle to try and help people plan for their retirement. So what we're looking at is something called targeted support. And it's a concept that will kind of say people like you are making decisions like this. So it will kind of look at you as kind of a cohort. So that could be, people in retirement taking a level of income, maybe between 65 and 70. That might be a cohort, and someone can say to you, people like you are taking a certain level of income. So they might be able to say, we think you may be taking a little bit too much here. So that's not personalized advice. You're not paying someone to give you specific advice, taking into account all your individual circumstances, which financial advice would be, but it's trying to help you make better decisions.
So it's harnessing the power of the crowd in that sense.
It is, yeah.
This is what the Joneses are doing.
Well,
You're too far one way or the other.
I mean, it happens in other industries, so if we look at Amazon, if you buy something from Amazon, Amazon will probably flick something to you and say, people who bought this also bought this type thing. So it's kind of just looking at the power of the crowd, I guess, and it's not unique to financial services. So we're kind of looking at what works elsewhere and maybe saying, could we use it here to try and help make people make better decisions?
Nudging people towards better outcomes in that regard. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's
Yeah,
never
I
going to
think
be as good as advice. It's never going to be as specific to your individual circumstances, but hopefully it's a step in that right direction.
it's a bit like loud budgeting, Ed. We talked on here before. Sorry, going a bit off topic, but we did talk about how, if we talk about stuff and you find out that you're completely errant to people who you like and respect. Ed and I have talked about sort of loud budgeting, where you say this is what you're doing and why you're doing it and how you're doing it and how that kind of fits in. It's a similar kind of principle, except obviously it's in a sort of regulated environment, which means is this going to give freedom for people to speak in those kind of generalities, whereas before they might have felt hamstrung to make those kind of comments, Andrew?
Yes, so providers would have, or whoever is involved in this, but potential platforms and providers might have worried that by giving this kind of opinion, it might fall into financial advice, and the regulator might say to them, "You actually give that individual financial advice, and therefore you're liable." Whereas the regulator's basically saying, as long as you fall within this construct, which we need to build over the next 6 months or so this isn't immediately available, this is going to be available down the line. As long as you fall within this construct, what you're saying is reasonable type of thing, and we're seeing it as an aid rather than specific advice.
So on the FCA's announcement today around this kind of improving that kind of targeted support, I thought one of the interesting concepts, and I mean it's nice to use colourful language, I guess, and but it's slightly bemused by it. They've called it the ostrich effect. So apparently people who essentially are disengaged from their pensions because they don't really know what to do about it. They have one, they're not getting, they don't get advice because they can't afford it, or, they don't have the right level of wealth to warrant it and that kind of thing. Don't know what to do about it, so they stick their head in the sand like an ostrich. That's the kind of the imagery that the FCA have gone with here.
Yeah, and I guess it's changes. We've seen changes to pensions over the last 15, 20 years. So we've seen automatic enrolment, which has been a big success in getting more people to save. They might not be saving enough, but it's getting more people to save. But it's kind of something that's being done to them. They're being put into a pension scheme. And hopefully they're staying, and hopefully over time they'll realise the benefits to that. But kind of where we are at the moment is that's been done to people, and they're being automatically enrolled and automatically invested. And then we get to 65 or so, and someone gets kind of handed whatever it is, £80,000, £100,000, which, a big sum of money, and basically going, here, just go and make a really sensible decision with this pot of money. And that's quite a difficult thing because they've never done it before. And if they don't have anyone to help them do it, their parents maybe didn't do it because they might have got a defined benefit or something like that. So we do need to find ways to engage people and help them make better decisions as they reach retirement with that kind of pot of money.
So this brings me nicely to your research, to Nucleus's research, and actually kind of why it's probably a good thing that the FCA is doing something about this, and that's because Nucleus has you produce an annual kind of confidence index, right? And confidence is falling at the moment. Is that the kind of the headline?
That's absolutely the headline. So this is only the second year. So this is something reasonably new for us, and this is the second year. So we can at least compare it to what we did last year, I guess. So very basic premise. We ask people, how comfortable do they think they'll be that they'll have enough money to live comfortably in retirement? And we ask them to rate that on a scale of 0 being not at all confident and 10 being super confident they'll have enough money. And within that, so we get a number, which I'll mention in a minute, but we can also dig deeper within that to try and work out the why, not just the number, so we can figure out the age, the gender, how much they're saving, whether they're in their own home, and a whole range of other information. So we don't just get a number, but we can try and look beneath that to try and figure out why people are confident and maybe why they're lacking in confidence, and therefore, hopefully, what they maybe need to do to become more confident. So on that 0 to 10 scale, the score came out at 4.6, so kind of below halfway, so relatively confident, but not particularly, if that makes sense. Within that goes quite a lot of splits, so goes quite a significant gender gap. So men were at 5.1, women at 4.1, so that's quite a significant difference. Probably not a big surprise. I think we all know there's a gender pay gap, and that falls across into pensions. So if women are not paid as much, they don't save as much in pensions. They're also more likely to have career breaks and things like that as well. So that can partly drive that lower pension saving, which will drive the lower confidence. And then age plays a reasonably significant part as well. So people of 55 and above are the most confident, still not massively confident, but the most at that age. Interestingly, the younger age groups, so kind of 18 to 24, and then the kind of next one up to mid-30s, they're again reasonably confident, and the lowest groups are kind of 34 to 55. Those fall down into the kind of 3.7 to 3.8 type out of 10 scoring. So that kind of that grouping is definitely the worst, and I guess if we're trying to figure out why, is that these people are kind of too late for defined benefits. So defined benefits kind of got gold-plated pension, where you get a promise of certain level of income from your employer. And those, for most people, if you don't work in the public sector, for most people, those have been scaled out. So people 50s, 60s might have got one early in the career, so they're benefiting from that. But people in their 30s, 40s might not do. And they've also probably missed the beginning of auto-enrollment. So auto-enrollment really just came in, in the last 10 years or so. So they maybe got it now, but they've kind of missed the boat where people, in their early 20s, that's all they've known, is that, so at least they're saving something. So that's maybe why I guess particular group is feeling particularly low in confidence.
Yeah, it's quite interesting that when you were talking there, Andrew, I was thinking, is that just the bullish confidence of youth? And then you hit your middle age and you think, oh, actually, this has got to get me through. So I don't know. I was thinking, is that it? But I think your point there is the main one, isn't it? Which is actually, if you've had a pension provision that you're aware of from a very young age that is designed to do what it needs to do, it sort of stands to reason that when you get to the point where you're managing it and thinking about it, you're confident in the provision that's there. Whereas, like you said, I suppose there was a little bit of a in-between generation of people who weren't auto-enrolled necessarily until later on, and so had to make their own arrangements, which was all, if I think about my own working experience, despite working in financial services, it was all a bit of some guy would come in from St. James's Place, was actually one of the guys who came into one of my old places where I worked and sat down and said, we're going to do you a pension and here's what it looks like. And, sign here. And that was it. And that was kind of the last I heard of it until I took a better look at it 5 years later and realized it had been consolidated into another pension fund that was charging ridiculous amounts of money, and then sort of decided to do something about it. And my confidence levels went up because of that. Weirdly, so it's a blessing in disguise. So yeah, it was, where am I going with all of this? It's quite an interesting thing. I think if I were, 20 odd or whatever, also enrolled into a pension and explained clearly via workplace communications and meetings and all the rest of it, this is what this is for, this is how we're going to contribute to it, this is where it might end up, then I wouldn't be surprised if that translated into a bit more of a sense of security about what I'm doing and why.
Yeah, and I think it's a really dull topic, but we shouldn't overlook that kind of power of compounding. The fact if you save early in life, it's a long period for that money to grow. If you're saving it in your 20s and you're not taking that money till 65 or whatever, that's 40 years. Hopefully that money is just sitting there growing and growing and growing.
Yeah, I don't think
And,
compounding's
and
dull,
that's quite,
Andrew. Sorry, just to cut across. We talked about it in the last one. It's a miracle, and everyone needs to know about it because it's going to make us a lot better off in our dotage. Well, I'm hoping anyway, based on some of the projections Ed's been throwing around on previous podcasts, he's going to be a squillionaire, so it's fine.
I'm trying to talk it out by telling everybody that compounding will make the millionaires, but let's not try. We're not trying not get the regulator after us for making promises.
Particularly not today.
Especially not today. But I think that's right. I think you've got to be optimistic about it. I am generally quite optimistic about mine. I think if you put, and I was sitting there thinking about it. Can you measure your optimism yourself for your own pension? And I think for mine, I would say a year ago I was probably more pessimistic than I am about it now. That's probably a reflection of the fact that markets have probably done better this year and that kind of thing. So the numbers look a bit better this year, and that's probably going to be different next year. But then it's kind of thing you just got to leave it for a long period of time. And I've had a pension now for a decade, and actually, without having done a huge amount, there is actually something building there, and that does feel good, and that does make me hopeful, kind of thing. And I think
it
that's
is, and I guess different. I mean, because it's not scientific what we did; it's a feeling. So it's difficult to be scientific. It's trying to get a grasp of what people's opinions and things are. But overall, about a third have said they're confident. So if you flip that in reverse, it's quite a sobering judgment that 2/3 are saying they're not confident about income. Now that could just be that they genuinely don't know how much you need and things like that, which is very valid comment type thing. But equally, it could be that they're simply not saving or not saving anywhere near enough. So.
Yeah, I do wonder. I mean, particularly with the younger people, you wonder about how engaged they are really with it. I guess having that auto enrollment as a very basic level is a basic form of like, okay, well, I've got a pension, I'm aware of it, but how kind of clued up are they about what's going on?
Ed, we talk about engagement a lot, though. Like, how engaged do you have to be? We talked about this with other people as well, Andrew. I'm interested in your view. Like, you do need to be engaged in that. You need to know that it's there. You need to know what you're investing in, but we've spoken before, and this is not financial advice, listeners. Ed will give you the proper disclaimer later. That so long as you know what you're doing and what the long-term plan is, you don't need to be that engaged with it, really, do you? You just need to be consistent with it and have a plan and kind of stick to it. Is that not,
Yeah, I think to me that word plan you mentioned a couple of times, that is absolutely key in all of this, and that came through very clearly in our research, is that people who had a plan, and this doesn't need to be a fancy plan, it doesn't need to be involving a financial advisor, it's just, do I have a kind of plan? What am I aiming for? And I'm sure that plan will be changed multiple times in years to come. But if you have that plan, then as long as you're moving in the right direction, do you need to worry necessarily hugely about all the underlying bits? I'm not sure you do. So I think it's about trying to save what you can, trying to save as early as you can, trying to consider could you boost that as you go? If you get a pay rise, could you save a little bit of that pay rise as you go? Can you take advantage of something your employer's offering? So some employers out there offer, kind of matching, so that if you pay a little bit more, they'll pay a little bit more as well. So there's just some quite straightforward bits that as and when you can afford to, you can maybe save a little bit more. But no, I don't think. I think it's all bits and pieces as opposed to thinking, I need to get to £1 million and how much do I need to save today and all that kind of stuff. I don't think most people need to get into that level of detail. It's all about kind of little steps.
I like that as a philosophy for life. It reminds me a little bit of when I was at university, is what's the absolute minimum I need to do here to get away with it, basically.
So hang on, did you take this approach to your dissertation and all the rest of it, did you?
All of it. Yeah, low 2-1, I got the 2-1, put that on the CV. Nobody's ever asked me for the certificate, and it's fine. So it's
just
great.
Enough education to perform. I mean, here he is performing.
If we're going to engage, I think you're right, Chris. Like, if we're going to get people to engage with their pensions, what is that minimum level? What look like that means you're going to be fine, kind of thing. And I think Andrew's point there, make a plan. Just make a plan, any plan. Well, something that's moderately straightforward and forward looking. I think that's really nice.
Yeah, I don't pull it out of thin air. Obviously, I think there are conversations and routes into this sort of conversations that are the right way to do it. I think it's quite interesting, and I'm going to say my 2 pennies on this, and won't put anyone on the spot. But part of this sort of latest announcement from the FCA around this sort of targeted support is in reaction to influencers and the gap that they're filling in terms of conversations and how that kind of stuff is going. And I think what those guys do really well from a sort of comm standpoint is they outline a plan. This is a plan that I'm doing. If I put this amount of money in, make a couple of assumptions about it, this is what I expect to get out the other end. And whenever I look on sort of Instagram or TikTok, that's compelling. The problem is they're not regulated. Some of these other people are shilling things that perhaps will mean people will not meet those plans, and that's where the danger is. And I think I'm not sure this is an entirely reaction to influencers, but they are mentioned as a catalyst for this, and I think it can't be ignored that there needs to be a sensible plan, right?
It does, and influencers came through in our research. And,
really?
People who were getting information from them, they weren't as confident as people getting regulated advice. So people getting regulated advice were the most confident, but people looking at influencers were more confident than people looking at generic guidance and government guidance and things like that. So, and as you say, that doesn't mean that all information coming from these people is bad, but the lack of regulation is a concern. Yeah. So, but equally, there's a gap there and it needs to be filled. I mean, Martin Lewis was mentioned, was probably the one individual that was mentioned quite a lot in our research, because he is that kind of one person that's got out there in the kind of national, on TV talking about some of these topics, which is, and we could definitely do with more of that. We could do with more of that from the government, in my view. I think the government should be doing more as education is concerned. And trying to help people understand some of these topics.
Martin Lewis does some great things, but in terms of investing, Ed, I know you talked about this before. He's got some gaps in that, with his platform that he doesn't necessarily cover, and that's his prerogative. But go on, Ed. Sorry,
this is one of my favourite financial media controversial opinions. Is that Martin Lewis doesn't do enough about. He's so powerful. Like, fair enough to him. MSC is fantastic, and I know great journalists. Who I've worked with in the past who work at MSC now. They should do more on pensions and investing. I know he did a little bit on it recently, but it's an important thing. We can only talk about how great credit cards are so much. How great, or whatever the best shopping deals and cashback is, and that kind of thing. That takes you so far, but pension will save your your retirement.
In fairness to him, he's doing a lot of heavy lifting on other stuff.
Of course.
and maybe this is why, where this sort of regulation and stuff will help. But no, I take your point, Ed, and I do think that it's a bit of a gap, and influencers have emerged into that gap. And like you say, for better, for worse, some are good, some are bad, some are in between. What we need to do is be clear on those lines and who's the right side, who's the wrong side, and then sort of move forward from there. So, yeah, I think that will, if we get that right, then confidence will increase, because you'll have. And it's interesting you mentioned that sort of the general guidance stuff is just too almost. I'm not putting words in your mouth here, Andrew, so you can correct me if I'm wrong. But the idea that it's almost too fuzzy, it's too woolly. People don't get a sense of direction out of it; they just get confused, and that creates paralysis in terms of decision making.
Yeah, and also a lot of it is written. And people interact and deal with things in different ways and things. And I think a lot of people making a decision almost want someone to say to them that's almost okay. I think they're just looking for that reassurance piece that you're not doing something completely mental here, that I'm doing something that's kind of okay. And I think that's what a lot of people want is they don't want to have to pay for advice. Now, I'm a huge supporter of advice. I would try and get as many people to advice as possible, and I think it's the best outcome. But not everyone will think that, and not everyone will have enough money for that. So we have to try and help those people as best we can, and effectively just giving them a piece of written material or very bland information is not necessarily doing as much as that. So we need to find more ways to do it. We also need to find ways, and I'm not the best person to talk about that because I'm old, but different ways of engaging with people, because you're talking about influencers. They're doing it on TikTok and all these kind of things. And that is what the generations are looking at, is they're not looking at necessarily websites or, older-fashioned ways of getting material. They're looking at newer ways. So as an industry, and that applies to my company as well, we need to find different ways to engage with people.
Yeah, I mean, I was just going to say, well, this is my sort of area of expertise, Andrew, in terms of how you land these messages. And what I would, and again, without turning this into an industry conversation too much, but there's some progress made. I think people recognize the fact that there's different formats. There's video, there's podcasts. We're doing podcasts now. There's TikTok, there's short form, there's long form, there's memes, whatever it may be. But actually, people still, I think, a lot of the firms that I deal with still feel better if somebody has a piece of paper handed into their hand and think that that's job done. And actually it's not. And maybe there's a way of thinking about how, over time we'll be able to see what the outcomes are of finding different ways to sort of spin those messages and talk about it. And we're working on some research at the moment as part of what we do at MRM called Young Money, which looks at the habits of 18 to 30-year-olds, which is, probably similar to what you found, Andrew, in some ways in terms of, how they consume their information, where they consume their information. So that some of the early findings have come through on that. And it is on those social channels where they look primarily and then go and look for confirmation from friends, family, and also from sort of websites and things after that. So I'm really interested in following that process and thinking about what that means for how information is disseminated in the future, particularly as we live in a attention economy where attention is valuable and it's being sucked up by all sorts of different things. It's harder and harder to get people to sit down and think about this sort of stuff. So we do need to be a bit more subtle about it, about how we go about it, whilst also making sure we stay the right side of the rules and we're giving all the right kind of messages. So, challenge accepted, I think, for financial services is how we go from there, right, Ed?
One of the really interesting trends in the past few months, I think, and I think this is possibly on the back of action or threat of action that the regulator is now taking, is some of the kind of more respectable influencers, I would call out there, ones who we've kind of interacted with in our world in the past. There's actually quite a few of them who are talking about actually getting their financial advice qualifications. Like they're actually becoming qualified advisors and getting regulated in order to be able to keep talking about these things on social media without fear of kind of, and basically jumping through all the hoops to ensure that the regulator doesn't start properly going after them, because the regulator is starting to go after influencers who are sharing bad information. And, we've seen them turning up in court as a result. So they are, the FCA is being more heavy-handed because this gap has been filled by people who aren't necessarily always trustworthy. So I think that's going to be really interesting to watch how that kind of develops. I do think there is a place, and personally I think there's a place for, I don't like the influencer term is kind of like, but I think there is a place for it. I think it's would be really good. And this is something that Young Money in the past has brought out, has brought out in the research, is there's a space for businesses and brands, companies, even like, big banks or whatever, to work with reliable influencers to convey good information to people using those channels. I think that could be a good way, a good middle ground kind of thing. I don't know.
Yeah, could be. I think it could work in that way. It'd be interesting to see what it does to confidence levels. And how often do you do this research, Andrew? Is it once a year? Is it
once a year we do it? Yeah.
Yeah. So hopefully we'll be able to track the difference these things will make over time and see whether it delivers better outcomes, right?
It is, absolutely. So as I say, this is the second year. So we're beginning to build up a bit of a track record now, and year on year we can begin to track changes that are made and what influence that has on people. And we can begin to track, ongoing what affects people. And there's obviously external factors that affect people. So, we've kind of gone through a cost of living crisis and things like that. So I'm sure that's had an impact on people's confidence, because just generally they're feeling probably financially less secure. But nonetheless, some of it is down to pension saving. And when we look at things like levels of contribution people are making, it's quite obvious, and it's perhaps a really simple statement, but it comes through quite clearly that the more you save, the more confident people are. So people saving kind of 10% upwards of their salary, or not personally, but in between them and their employer and things, but 10% upwards are noticeably more confident than people saving below that level. That kind of seems a bit of a threshold. And if you can get above 20%, then those people are very confident, but I accept that that's not easy for people to do so. And at the other end of the spectrum, there's maybe about 40% people not saving at all, which is obviously a concern. Interestingly, those people were actually more confident than people saving a little bit. So that's perhaps just maybe they've got other money elsewhere, maybe they've got other sources of wealth elsewhere, or it could just be that they're not wanting to think too seriously about it.
This kind of brings me to one of my other favourite hobby horses, which I know Chris loves it when I talk.
2 in 1 podcast, Andrew. Let's see if we can get the hat trick before the end.
In as I can. No, because it's mentioned in the report, Chris. Right.
Oh, is it? Okay, right.
Yeah, state pension. So state pension, there's a distinct lack of confidence, isn't there? I mean, what was the number?
Massive lack of confidence.
44% of respondents don't even think it'll exist in the future, and that's higher among kind of millennials and sort of, what is it, 35 to 55. Remember, I can't remember specifically, but yeah.
So got 5 to go 2 categories, got 5 to 54. So got 5 to 44, 45 to 54-year-olds. More than half of that grouping don't believe the state pension will exist. So, and that's got to drive. We talked about that grouping being lower in confidence, and if you don't believe the state pension will be there, which is a kind of bedrock of your retirement income, and you build above that. If they don't believe that's going to exist, then it's not a surprise that they're lacking confidence. And this is, going back to hobby horses, this is one of my hobby horses. This is something government needs to talk about. It probably is no surprise that people lack confidence in the state pension when every year we approach a budget, there's a massive debate about should we have a triple lock, shouldn't we have a triple lock, what is it continue? And it's easy for someone like me in the industry to know that triple lock and state pension are separate things, but I don't think people in the real world necessarily see that.
No, I agree with that.
What they see is a debate over the state pension every single year. And so what we need to do, in my opinion, is take some of these decisions out of the political environment, because state pension is not about the next 5 years. State pension is about the next 50 years. So we need long-term decision making about actually what can we afford as a country, what's the right age for it to come in at, how does it interact with working age benefits, is what should it increase in line with, and triple lock and things like that. So we need a kind of almost a fun, not a reset, but let's look ahead, plan properly, and then we can say to people very confidently, you will have a state pension. We don't need to be guaranteeing amounts, but we're telling them the concept will exist. And we take that outside of the political environment. Because I genuinely think all the political parties think there has to be a state pension. So I don't think it's wild to think that we could get some sort of consensus on that kind of topic.
I'd put myself in that cohort of people who are extremely sceptical of the state pension existing as it is today. Not necessarily saying that it won't exist at all, but as it looks today, and I'm already aware of that my state pension age, I think, is going to be 70 or something like that. I don't think it'll exist in that format by the time I get to claim it, because I just don't see it as sustainable. I'd love to see a situation where we had, and I think there is a national wealth fund being created now and that kind of thing. Could we actually back the state pension with a real pension fund as opposed to just making it an accounting trick in the tax, and that kind of thing. That I would see as a positive reform to kind of fix something like that, because it's been going on for a long time. And the thing that it makes me cringe when I see it is when people complain about, they're taking away the triple lock, and I've earned my state pension, and people behave like there is a fund sitting there waiting for them, and it's not. It's a benefit. It's something that comes out of general taxation, and it's unsustainable. It's just pretty simple. So I appreciate I'm taking us down a bit of a political.
It's turning into a grand national of hobby horses, Andrew. Yeah. I don't know how you got.
No, I think it's really important. I think the research is bearing out my kind of negativity about it. I think it proves the point that people are skeptical and don't think it's going to be there. I will also caveat, and this, I'm going to end my thought here now. Caveat that I think
we're going over Beecher's Brook here, right? Okay, go on.
For me, and for anybody, who's got a state pension, who's got in a similar boat where they think, well, I'm not really going to, I can't rely on it. I take that as kind of a positive fuel to be like, oh, I need to do more with my own personal pension to make sure that I look after myself when I'm retired and I don't have to rely on it. And I would love people to take more of a mindset like that, and I hope they do.
Actually, that's where I'm at with it. I haven't really considered the state pension, to be brutally frank. I have just thought it won't be enough. So what am I going to do? And kind of got on with it. And I take all your points there about it being a benefit, Ed. And I also take your point, Andrew, that having some kind of a long-term security in that would help with the planning, right? And I think that's sort of a general issue with the political class. Well, I get on my hobby horse at the rear of the field here talking about that actually, long-term planning has been missing from our politics for a long time, particularly when it comes to the design of these kind of things. And unintended consequence comes around by people sort of chopping and changing and tweaking and moving things around. Now, I appreciate we do have to adapt to the realities that global challenges and national challenges and economic challenges pose to all of us. But actually, some long-term thinking, some long-term commitment, people can get behind that, and then, as you say, plan accordingly. And that's the strength of doing those kind of things. So, you've seen it with the tax changes recently, and I don't want to get into the details of that either. But some people who have been planning for pensions for years are going to see some of the changes that have come down the budget significantly impact what it is they've got in their retirement funds. And most, I suppose, at the higher end of that will be able to weather that. But for a lot of people, that means that they're going to end up losing a lot of money in a new taxation regime, which changes their plan. So have a plan and stick to it, fair enough. But if you constantly feel, as you say, when we're coming up to budget time, that plan can be turned over, upended at any point, then that might create an issue. So let's have people some bedrocks, like you say, that they can plan around, and then we have to see where the world leads us, basically.
It would certainly be nice to have a bit of stability in the pension tax system. And I think that undoubtedly would give people more confidence if that was there. And that doesn't mean you never have changes, because I accept what you said, that you've always got things, potentially coming at a left field, but that doesn't mean you need to change things at every single budget, which is kind of where we seem to have been over the last 15 years, is constant tweaks. So again, if we could get some sort of consensus, get a long-term savings commission looking at those, making recommendations and saying, actually, this is the best way to do this. And not forgetting, that's how we got auto-enrollment. We had a pensions commission, so an independent body, looked at this, came up with proposals. All political parties backed that. They still back that 20 years later. It's been a success. That doesn't guarantee everything will be a success that comes out of a pensions commission, but it feels that we should get more stability in that way. So I think we should do that. If we did that, I think we get more confidence because of that. And then we need to again get people to build on that and take some responsibility and about trying to save more if we can afford to do so.
You're absolutely right about auto-enrollment being, a policy success, a cross-party policy success in terms of making it work, and it's having a real tangible benefit. So it's a great model. It's a great example of how this can work if it's given the right amount of thought.
We just need to now effectively think about moving it to the next level, I guess, is 8%. And going back to that confidence piece is, and we've not tested this in the research, so I am floating something here, but do people out there think the government have put me effectively in a pension scheme at 8%, therefore that should be enough to give me a good retirement? And I think we accept that for a lot of people, 8% is not enough to give them a good retirement. So, but again, without planning and so on, people might not appreciate that.
I think you can at that point you start getting into the weeds of things like default funds and whether they're invested in the right way depending on their age and that kind of thing, and conservative approaches, because you see kind of some of those big kind of master trusts tend to be a little bit more conservative than maybe they should be, and that kind of thing, and that can lead to perhaps not the best possible opportunities for kind of growth and that kind of thing, but perhaps another topic for another day before we go down that rabbit hole. Andrew, this has been really interesting. I love talking about, I'm going to admit openly here that I love talking about pensions. I know Chris really enjoys it too. But yeah, Andrew, your insights and the research really good, really interesting. where can people go to have a read of it? Was actually an important question that I meant to ask.
The simplest place is the Nucleus website, so nucleusfinancial.com. On the front page of there, they'll be able to download the report and read it happily, or hopefully happily. It's a bit sobering. It's a bit of a sobering read, as I mentioned, but I think there's some good information in there. I think there are some positives coming through. It was quite interesting, again, when we asked people about when they should start planning. Every cohort said they should start planning in the 20s. They should start, paying into retirement in the 20s. Whether they actually do it or not, but particularly among over 55s, it was a massive amount. I think it was over 70% said planning should start in your 20s. So I kind of read that as, if I had my time again, would I start earlier? Yes, I would, and I think that was, whether that's correct or not, but that was my way of kind of reading what people were telling us.
Brilliant. Thank you. Thank you very much, Andrew. It's been a real pleasure to have you on. Obviously, we'll pop a link to the research as well in the show notes so people can go and find that. And we should put something on the Mouthy Money website too, so keep an eye out. But yeah, Andrew, thank you for joining us. Chris, thanks as ever.
Good to be here.
Thank you.
Pleasure. My pleasure.
For being my co-host. And thank you everybody for listening as ever. I hope you all have a very Merry Christmas, because I think we might be about to take a break. I can't quite remember the schedule now, but thank you everybody. I'm waffling now, so goodbye.
Don't forget to subscribe to the show on Spotify, Apple Podcast, or YouTube. You can also follow all our latest updates on TikTok, Instagram, or X. Finally, check out all our money stories on the Mouthy Money website and subscribe to our weekly newsletter for all the latest straight to your inbox. Thank you and goodbye.